I'm Adam Smith, and I'm really pleased to be hosting today as part of our ongoing Salon series where we discuss careers and research topics. These sessions are all about sharing experiences, exchanging ideas, and supporting one another as we navigate the challenges of academia and research careers. And today we're focusing on a hugely important topic, which is mental health. Research can be rewarding, but it can also come with pressures that take a toll on our well-being. Long hours, job insecurity, imposter syndrome, and the constant push for publications and funding can all contribute to stress, anxiety, and burnout. And this is a topic that resonates with me personally. I've had my own challenges with mental health and anxiety, which I've openly written about on the Dementia Researcher website. So I know it can be tough to manage these pressures. And I also know how important it is to have conversations and share experiences and access the right support. And no one should feel they have to struggle alone. We're incredibly fortunate today to have two fantastic speakers who will be sharing their insights. We have Dr. Rosemary Jackson, who is a Principal Investigator at the University of Dundee, working on APOE. And we also have Dr. Leah who is an evidence specialist, evidence synthesis specialist at the University of Portsmouth. Working generally in Portsmouth. Your job changed recently. Both jobs have changed. The bio down here are both incorrect, so apologies for that. As many of you will know from attending our salon sessions in the past, each of our speakers are going to talk for 10 minutes, and then we're going to have a chat as well. I've got some questions. I'll hopefully have some questions for them as well, and we'll invite you to share your own questions too. And then what we'll do is we'll join you in the chat, but we're going to stay on camera today as well at the end, where we hope to bring you into the conversation to get your tips and learn about your experiences and how you've coped. Of course, if anybody doesn't want to share, you're welcome to do that anonymously using the Q&A function. If you'd rather not give your name, you can use the Q&A function and tick the anonymous button to make those points. But for now, I think that's enough from me. Thank you both very much for joining today. Leah has very kindly agreed to present first.
Yes, thank you very much, and lovely introduction.
So I'll hand over to you now, Leah, and I'm going to work out how to lower that hand. It's not a camera thing. Thank you, Leah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So let me just try and share my slides. It was working a second ago. It's not going to now. There we are. We're there. So I put a lot of thought and thinking around what I wanted to talk about today, because mental health is such a such a difficult thing to talk about a lot of the time. And everyone goes through their own mental health challenges at some point in their lives. And so I thought what would be really useful to talk about was different ways I've found of coping or managing episodes of poor mental health. I'm sure everyone here in academia has at some point had those thoughts and feelings where you really feel like you're struggling. And I think it's often around when we're in academia and we're conducting these projects that we have real personal attachments to, and you're really personally justifying and defending the decisions you're making. And then those decisions are being questioned, and it can really make you have a bit of a crisis of confidence and sort of set you on that road of poor mental health. So I want to start a little bit by talking a little bit about me and my journey, I suppose, through mental health. So I have had issues with depression for a long time, and I sort of take medication for that, and it's been quite a permanent fixture of my life. And when I joined the world of academia, things took quite a negative turn for me, because suddenly I was having to justify all these decisions and have a lot of confidence in myself that I didn't have at the time. I'm pleased to say that it's developed over time, and I'm not a much more confident person now, but it definitely caused me problems when I first started. And some of the things that I found really, really useful, and you're probably going to laugh at me, but we sort of, myself and Rosie chatted a bit about this before we started. We were thinking about our coping mechanisms. And one of the things we talked about was how mental health can feel like a bit of a demon on your shoulder. It's like a little voice that's niggling away at you and telling you off for doing things not as well as other people, or not getting that paper done in time, or not thinking about this particular aspect of your research, or not planning something as well, or missing a meeting, or all of those things that that little voice tells you that you're not doing well enough. And one of the things I found really particularly useful was naming that little voice and naming that little demon that was on my shoulder and telling me I wasn't doing enough all the time. So again, you can laugh. I named my demon a really silly name. I called it Quinfarlo. So I often now talk about when Quinfarlo's acting up, or when he's talking a bit loudly, and it really starts to bother me, and it starts to impact how I feel about things. What was really useful about naming that voice was that then it made it much easier to talk about. Instead of saying to someone like, oh, I'm just not feeling great today, or I'm having a bit of difficulty, or talking to colleagues or my husband even, saying that I'm really struggling at the moment, I could then say something like, oh, Quinfarlo's being a bit loud, or Quinfarlo's really taking over. And it just like really helped me talk about what that voice was doing and how it was making me feel in a way that made sense. The next thing I found particularly useful about having that was, now that I had that name for that voice, was being able to be curious about it. And I don't mean being curious in the understanding where it comes from, or what is causing that those thoughts and feelings, and what's causing that voice to say that. I mean being curious about just noticing that it's there, and noticing that Quinfarlo was being loud, and that I was having an emotional response to that. And this is something that I describe as a bit of it's like a muscle. You have to practice it. And at first, I might not notice things straight away, and I might not notice straight away that Quinfarlo was being loud, and I might not notice for a week or a couple of days. But when I did, I'd suddenly sit there and think, oh yeah, that was really difficult, and that was really upsetting, that voice being there. And just being curious about when that's happening, and being aware of it happening, means that you can start to be a bit more separate from it and externalize that a little bit more. The next thing, once you've named your voice, you've named your demon, and you started to be curious and notice when it's popping up, the next thing is really important: to be kind. And I don't mean being kind to other people, I mean being kind to yourself and being compassionate. And one of the things I always ask myself now is, if this voice was saying things about a friend or a colleague, what would I say? Do I think those things about a friend or a colleague that's doing the same things as me? And no, I don't. And I would be kind and compassionate to that person. So it's about being kind and compassionate to yourself in response to those thoughts and feelings that are having a negative impact on you. And then finally, my thing was about finding your thing. And me and Rosie talked about this a lot. And I think it's really important throughout your academic career is to have something outside of academia, outside of anything connected to your work at all, that gives you some kind of sense of achievement, or some sense of satisfaction, or having done something and completed a project. Because often we have so many projects that either don't get finished, or they don't quite end up how we want to. We're never quite satisfied with them. As you would have heard Adam just say just now, our jobs have changed so much. There's so much left over from my last role that I'm still hoping to finish. And there's always that voice on the back of my shoulder saying, well, come on, you need to get this done. But it's really important that I have something that gives me a sense of achievement and satisfaction outside of my work. And for me, those are things like knitting. And it could be that my sense of satisfaction and achievement comes from finishing a scarf that's absolutely terrible and bobbly. It probably isn't a straight line at all. But I finished that project, and it gives me something like I've done something and I've finished something. So crafty hobbies for me are things that work. But what your thing will be depends like on your hobbies, and it's something you kind of have to be a bit patient with and practice, and try lots of different things. And there will be times where you try something and it really doesn't help, and it really doesn't give you any sense of achievement or satisfaction. And for me, that's running. I'm never going to try running again, because that made everything a million times worse. But knitting, quilting, swimming, those are those things that give me that sense of achievement and satisfaction. And I think it's really important to find your thing that gives you that feeling of having achieved something. So those are my take-home messages: is name your demon, name your mental health, name that thing that's bugging you and making you feel rubbish, and be curious about it. Start to notice when it happens, and even if it's a month later, just notice that you felt that way and that was happening. Be kind to yourself and be compassionate and treat yourself with compassion. Give yourself a break, give yourself a rest, and be understanding. Of course, you can be stressed because we have really stressful jobs that can be really difficult to manage. And then find that thing that gives you that sense of achievement and sense of satisfaction. And those are the sort of daily coping mechanisms that I employ on a daily basis, even now.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you.
That's really great of you to share your own personal stories on that as well. Have you got to a stage where you can spot the early kind of warning signs? Can you tell when you've got a particularly kind of episode building?
Absolutely now. And it came from that being curious and naming something and being able to talk about it. And maybe at first I wouldn't notice that it was coming for a month or so. And now it's almost instant. As soon as that feeling of being an imposter or not doing enough starts to kick in, I notice that straight away. And then because I've got those things that give me the satisfaction, I can then start to do those things more to head off that voice getting louder and starting to take over more. So it's become like a muscle memory.
I had the same kind of realization at some point that I started to be able to recognize when it was coming on, which I couldn't before. It suddenly just kind of hit, and being able to recognize that kind of made me realize, oh, those coping strategies that I don't use day in, day out. I have to say, I kind of, the things that you've mentioned, I tend to kick in with those at the point I've got a problem, which is probably not good advice for people. But it's important to recognize that you're not alone. I went in search of facts and figures before in preparing for today. There was a study in Nature in 2019 found that over 36% of PhD students sought help for anxiety and depression during their PhD. And there was a Wellcome Trust survey in 2020 reported that 70% of researchers felt stressed or overwhelmed in their roles. Yeah. So it's not a surprise with stats like that we feel this way, and important to highlight that, you're definitely, it's in the title of our webinar, but you're not alone. So thank you for sharing your story. Let's go to Rosemary now and hear from you, Rosemary. Thank you.
All right. Hi. Okay. So we're going to slideshow mode. So like Leah said, she and I chatted about this beforehand, and we both decided that it would be a nice idea to start a little bit with our own journey, just to remind everyone that they are, in fact, not alone. And that is kind of where I took this. So my story is I hail from sunny Southern California, and I flew across the Atlantic to the University of St Andrews for my undergraduate degree. I went to Edinburgh for my PhD. I then flew back across the Atlantic to Boston for my postdoc, and I have since returned to apparently this little epicenter of stars, to the University of Dundee as a PI. Now, if you hear that story, you would, that's the easy story. I say that to people, and people are like, wow, you've done really well. That is the perfect track. You do your undergrad, you do your PhD, you do your postdoc, you become a PI. No problems. Well, of course, it's not that simple. And so if we restart the story for a second, oh, that's not supposed to happen. Ignore that star. I flew to St Andrews, where I met my husband, who at the time was obviously my boyfriend. And we moved together to Edinburgh, where we lived for 4 years happily while I did my PhD. And then I moved to Boston, but he couldn't come. So this precipitated a moment where I was alone in a new city, all by myself, feeling very, very lonely, very, very alone, very, very anxious. and very uncertain. And I spiraled, and I've always had a bit of an anxiety, slightly more anxious than an average person, but this was a whole new level. And it was the first time I'd ever felt like this. It was the first time I'd felt like I totally lost control of everything, and I became very, very anxious and potentially a little bit depressed. And I want to say that the situation resolved itself, or I resolved the situation, or, with time things have healed, and they have very much, and the situation was resolved. But that only came about with me taking a very long, hard look at my life and learning some very hard truths. And those are the kind of hard truths that I think we don't talk about enough that make people feel so alone when they are having a mental health crisis. And so these are the hard truths that I am going to take out and tell you now, as your friend, as someone who wants you to succeed, all of you, even if I don't know you, because I learned them at the wrong moment for me. I learned them when I was already having a terrible time. And if you learn them now, when maybe you can look at them with a little more clarity, then when you are having a terrible time, they won't feel as scary. So, you are not special. Practice does not make perfect. You do not need to be a scientist or a researcher or whatever it is you are. You and your mental health problems will make other people's life more difficult. And you do not need to be true to yourself. So, what I mean by that is you are not special. You are not the first person to go through this. You are not alone. The people around you have had these problems before. They will have these problems in the future. And the best way to understand yourself in a moment where you don't trust yourself is to ask the people you do trust. Know right now that you are not the first person to have had these problems. You are not the first person to have any problem. There are 7 billion people on the planet currently. And so while your situation may feel totally unique to you, the overarching themes of what you are as a human being, what human beings are and what they want doesn't necessarily change dramatically from person to person. Now, that being said, not every single person has the same ability to cope or the same coping mechanisms that work for them. And actually, when Leah and I had a chat before, we realized that absolutely everything I do to cope with being an anxious person, she was like, kill me now. Why would I do that? So I love to go for a run. I think it's very, very good. For me, Leah was like, I will never run again. It was terrible. I love to cook. Leah was like, nope, that's my husband's job. And I don't want to go and sit and watch birds. That's not fun for me. So whereas Leah loves birds, and that was a big moment for her, was discovering her love of birds. So, you're not special. Some of you on this call will resonate with me and want to go for a run. Some of you will love looking at birds, and that's everyone is different. But this is not the first time that someone has gone through a mental health crisis, and the people around you can help, and they want to help. So I maybe put these slightly out of order because this would have been a good time to go down to bullet point number 4, but that's not the point. Practice makes permanent, and practice makes easier, but it doesn't make perfect. Just because you've been anxious before, just because you've been depressed before, and you've gotten through it before, does not mean that you are an expert in getting through it. And I should say right now, I am not a mental health expert. So if everything I'm saying right now is contradicted for you by your therapist, listen to your therapist. Don't listen to me. I'm a stranger on the internet. So when we say practice doesn't make perfect and we say practice makes permanent, what that means is that those coping mechanisms that help you when you are in a bind, when you are having a mental health crisis moment, when you are feeling worse than average, if you've practiced those before, if you've made healthy habits of those things, if you have worked exercise into your routine, then when you're having, for me specifically, when you're having or when I'm having a moment of extreme anxiety, it's easier for me to go for a run because it is something I do already. You don't need to be a scientist. This is not the only job worth doing, and you're not less than for doing something else. You choose to be a scientist, and that's immensely powerful because it means 2 things. One, that you are here of your own free will and you can change at any moment. If it all becomes too much, that's totally okay. But number 2, your worth as a human being, not tied up in your ability to do science. You are worth so much more than being a scientist, because that's just not something you need to be. This was the one that I struggled the most with when I was having a really hard time, which is that me and my mental health will make other people's life more difficult. I'm an incredibly self-sufficient person. I'm an incredibly organized person. I have an Excel spreadsheet mapping out the next 5 years of my life, and different Excel spreadsheet mapping out the next 25 years of my life. I have a lot of spreadsheets. And so the fact that all of a sudden I could not get myself out of, or felt like I could not get myself out of a situation that I was in, and I needed to rely on other people, and that would make their life more difficult, it was really, really hard. And it's okay. I did make other people's lives more difficult. The way I got myself out of my situation was I got married to my husband, and I returned to the UK for 3 months to work in my PhD lab while we submitted his green card paperwork, because for weird immigration reasons, if you submit green card paperwork in the UK, it takes 5 months. If you submit immigration paperwork in the US, it was going to take 1.5 years. That's an aside. But effectively, what that required was my PhD supervisor being willing to pay me for 3 months in the UK, and my postdoc supervisor being willing to wait for me for 3 months. And both of those people were reasonably early in their PI journeys. So losing me or paying me was actually a pretty big ask. This wasn't a 12-person lab where one person gone for 3 months is going to make no difference. I was my postdoc supervisor's only postdoc. So letting go of me for 3 months was a huge sacrifice on her part. But she was willing to let me do that. And that was something I will always be grateful for. But it's also something that I learned a lot about myself there, is that you have to let other people help you. And the last one is, you do not need to be true to yourself. That voice on your shoulder, Quinn Farlow, whatever you're going to call it, your little devil, squash it. The part of you that's telling you that you're not good enough, the part of you that's telling you that you can't, you don't need to be true to that part of yourself. So some actions that I found really useful, and some actions that you can take, is to take that space, that grace, that kindness that you are offered. Take that break that someone is giving you, and use it to build yourself back to the position that you can pay it back, right? So I was given this amazing grace period as a postdoc that I needed in order to be able to regain my mental health and regain my moment of clarity. And I'm now in a position as a PI, brand new, but still here we are, where I get to pay that back. And when someone comes to me and they say, look, Rosie, I am struggling so much, I cannot do my job right now, I can say, that's okay. You take what you need. Let me help you. Building really healthy habits so that those habits are easier when you're not healthy. Sleep. Just, you got to do it. It's not easy, but it has to happen. Exercise for me is a really important one. I actually think it's more important than people realize. Going for, it doesn't need to be a run, but anything, going for a walk, going for a hike, going for a bike ride, lifting weights, whatever it is, endorphins make you happy, and happy people don't kill their husbands, as Legally Blonde taught us many years ago. So endorphins are good for you. Take regular breaks, go on holiday. Make sure that you make time for your hobbies, and make sure that your hobbies are something that you feel reward you, that you get a level of satisfaction from. And then build a healthy mindset. And there's 2 reasons for this. One, you have further to fall. So that's always good. If you start higher up, you got further to go before you're at rock bottom. And second of all, you're more prepared when you do hit rock bottom, or when you start to fall. If you build this healthy mindset, your habits can kick in and help protect you and help get you through to the point that you are willing to become okay again. Because you probably will fall again. So remember, you are not alone. You are not special. You are not different. You are not unique. You are a person, and being a person is messy. It's easier to change how you act than what you think. If you are in a downward spiral and everything is terrible, you are going to struggle to change that mindset. But you can change your actions. And sometimes that's enough. Again, if your therapist disagrees with me, trust your therapist. It's all luck. Life is luck. You are incredibly lucky to have been born in the first instance. So a lot of the good things that happen to you, those things are luck. And a lot of the bad things that happen to you, that's bad luck. But when you recognize how much of your life is based on luck, it makes you very grateful for all of the good moments that you have and very empathetic to people who are having a bad time. And sometimes that person is you that's having a bad time. But luck favors the prepared. Let's not deny that working really hard, being on top of it, sets you up for success, right? You can be incredibly lucky and make very bad choices. And when you do that, it's that very good luck is diluted. And you can have incredibly bad luck and still make really good choices. So, again, luck favors the prepared, but you do need to just be very aware because it makes you very empathetic towards yourself and towards other people when bad things happen. And then this is my last point, which was a New York Times article that I read recently about why you will marry the wrong person, which I thought was very interesting and very funny. But the point I wanted to take from it for this is that the man said that angry people are optimists. And when we were talking earlier, Leah and I were talking earlier, and she said, do you think people in academia have a higher incidence of mental health and a higher incidence of stress because they're perfectionists? I said that I didn't think it was that. And I think it's because they're optimists. You think it's all going to work out. You think it's going to be great. And then when it's not, when it doesn't meet that expectation, you're devastated. Don't squash the part of you that's an optimist, but maybe just build up the part of you that's a realist. So that when it's not the perfect, shiny, amazing, beautiful picture that you had in your head, when your Western blot is a little bit smearier than it should be, when your data points don't necessarily all line up in a perfectly straight line, that is not the end of the world. It's okay. And again, just you are not alone. And that's my the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Rosemary. Can I ask how do your mental health problems manifest themselves? Because I think for me, one of the things, like, I didn't recognize I had a problem, to be quite honest. I until it really, really hit me. And even then I was like, well, this can't be a mental health problem. I'm over 40. I've never had problems with mental health or anxiety before. Suddenly at 3 o'clock in the morning, though, I kind of woke up feeling like I was going to have a heart attack. And 2 hours later, I'm in A&E and they're like, I think you've got anxiety. I'm like, I can't have that. I'm in my 40s. I've never had problems. So how do you recognize the difference, if you like? How do you know that you think you've got this problem? What do you think about that?
So I think it's twofold. So for me personally, like I said, my sort of moment of mental health crisis was precipitated by the combo effect of being incredibly lonely and having lost control, right? I have always known that I run a little anxious, but I would never have said that it was a mental health problem. I actually think that little bit of baseline anxiety is not bad for you, It means that whenever there is a crisis, I am ready to go. I got a spreadsheet, guys. I got a Word document. We're going to get through this with my pre-planned exit strategy. Is that normal? No, but it's something I'm perfectly happy to live with. So in my opinion, you have a problem whenever you think you have a problem. If whatever your brain is telling you is making it more difficult for you to live the life you want to live, you have a problem. Some people's problems require medication. Some people's problems require talk therapy. Some people's problems require a very long walk on the beach and a bubble bath, right? Like, it's still a problem. It's your problem, and you get to solve it how you want to solve it. No one is going to tell you that you must go for a long walk on the beach and then have a bubble bath. If that is not your deal, then that's chill. So I think a lot of the time we wait for something catastrophic to go wrong to admit that we have a problem. And for me, like, so how did I know I had a problem? I stopped sleeping. I kind of stopped eating, and I lost 15 pounds. And I was like, cool, great, this is bad. I cried myself to sleep every night, right? Like, that's how I knew I had a problem. looking back, I have always had a problem. I was just quite good at managing it. And then at some point, I lost control of my ability to manage my problem. And that's when I realized myself that I did have one. And now I'm back to the point where I think I probably still have a problem, but I, again, am very good at managing it. So, and I actually think that again, my baseline level of anxiety is, I would say, more of a superpower.
And it can yeah, but I would absolutely agree. And it can be, it's easier said than done sometimes, isn't it? Because it doesn't, I've known people who've suffered with depression and live with depression, and hearing from other people saying to you, oh, you should go for a walk, and you should get more sleep, and you should drink more, and these things, because quite often I think anybody who's gone through this kind of knows what they should be doing, because even if you just Google this in 2 minutes, everything we've said here will be the first 2 pages on Google that'll tell you to do the same stuff. But it's harder to know what you've got to do and then actually doing it. I don't know, Leah, how did you how do you force yourself to do these things when you're at your lowest?
It's a really good question, and I think you're absolutely right that these things that we've talked about, they're all kind of standard things people will tell you to do, go for a walk, but actually getting yourself to do that's impossible. And often it can become a bit of a cycle that, okay, well, I know what I need to be doing and I'm not doing it, this is my fault, and it adds to that spiral a lot of the time. And for me, this is where it's about recognizing and being curious about what's happening within you, and just noticing that actually those thoughts are there. Be curious about them, notice them happening, and don't put too much pressure on yourself. There's the example of exercise. So I love swimming now. I go swimming 3 times a week, and it's one of my things that I really look forward to, because I can't think about anything. And I start thinking about something, or my brain starts thinking about work, I lose all my coordinates, I have a load of water, and I'm coughing and spluttering and looking like I'm drowning. I have to focus and have empty my brain completely. But if you'd have said to me 3 years ago, go for a swim, I would never have done that. I would have wanted to, and I would have loved the idea, and I would have known that it would have been really helpful, but I wouldn't have done it because I just wasn't practiced enough at emptying my brain and things. And it's taken 3 years of noticing, being curious, and being compassionate to myself to get to the point where those exercises and those things that you read on the internet actually make a difference. So be compassionate towards yourself.
Do you think it makes it, because you both mentioned your husbands in your presentations? I mean, not everybody, of course, is going to have a significant other at home. They might be living at home, particularly if you're kind of younger, maybe, or a PhD student. You might be in student accommodation somewhere. You might not have that same support system, or you might think you haven't got that same support system around. What advice would you have for those that don't necessarily have that close person to confide in, or to push you along a little bit to help? I don't know, Rosemary.
Yeah, well, so okay, so I just want to say first that I love my husband dearly. He is an excellent, excellent human being. He was near useless for this. Uh, bless him. He tried. He tried really hard. But my sister was actually a much, much better source of support when I was like actively spiraling. Because she has had her own, spirals. Whereas my husband is probably one of the most mentally stable people I've ever met, which is great for him. So it doesn't have to be an intimate partner. A best friend is just as good, a sibling, a parent. If you don't have anyone that you feel that you can reach out to and that you can connect with when you need help, I would highly recommend professional support. I actually would highly recommend professional support irregardless of if you have someone who loves you, because someone who loves you is not going to tell you the same things as someone whose job it is to make you better. So like I said, my sister was an amazing support system for me. My family was in general. But at the end of the day, I think genuinely believe that seeing a therapist was probably the thing that pulled me out. And that the biggest thing my sister did to support me was to encourage me to do that. The universities have a lot of, if you are at a university, they have a lot of mental health support built in to being at a university, and they can provide that to you for often a short period of time. But uh, you know, and then there's also long-term therapy, long-term talk therapy that people need. I
Exactly.
will also say this. Sorry, can I just want to finish this thought that you are totally within your rights, regardless of if they are free or if the university has given them to you. You can sack your therapist if you do not get on. If this person does not help you, if they are not seeing your problems in the way that you like, if they can't help you just because of who they are and how they work, then ditch them. Right? Don't assume that because they are a professional, they know more about you than you do. The first therapist I ever went to wanted me to cry, right? I didn't want to cry. I wanted someone to help me solve my problems. So I immediately was like, we're done. And I found someone else. And I found someone who was very data driven, very spreadsheet oriented. And that spoke to me, right? That person and I could communicate about things that were bothering me in a way that me and the person who wanted me to cry. And like, don't get me wrong, I cried. I cried at therapy, like many times with this person who was very spreadsheet oriented. But because she and I could communicate and I felt she could help me, she could help me. So if the first person that you talk to, the first therapist you go to isn't for you, it's not that therapy isn't for you, it's that person isn't for you. Sack your therapist, find someone else. You can have as
Good.
many therapists as you want until you find one that helps you.
Absolutely. Oh, great advice. And you're right about, obviously, I mean, many of the people watching this will be researchers based in a university. Those university support services are there. We've had a comment from somebody in the audience saying that their university support service was fantastic and helped them apply for a particular round. So now they're seeing a mental health mentor each week that really helps. And we've had another comment about, Leah, loving your comment about running and how it wasn't helpful for them either. They tried spinning. I've never tried spinning.
Spinning used to be good for me, but there was a break at some point where it suddenly became really not good. But I think it was Esther said that about running as well. Yes, but running for me is something that makes that voice louder. Because I did the Couch to 5K, and I started going to the park runs to try and get really involved. And everyone was saying running's really good for your mental health. But every time I went running, once I went to park run, and I got halfway through it and just cried because it was just so the dislike of myself, and I was really telling myself off, and running was not for me.
My problems always kicked in the evening, which was always super inconvenient because then everything I would do to cope with that, in the moment, were things that you don't traditionally do at 2:00 in the morning. So I became very familiar with my neighborhood, and I'd be the kind of slightly strange guy walking around like my village at 2:00 in the morning. Even the dog, I have a dog. I was like, really? Do we need to go for a walk now? But he's kind of wanted to go with me. It's like, I need to go. What are you doing? If you're not in a university, you don't have access to that support. Of course, there are charities like Mind, which are particularly helpful. They have a support line. I'll mention the number now, which is 0300 102 1234. I think getting the help. Go on, Leah.
I just wanted to pick up on something Esther said, and I think it comes into if you feel like you don't have that support network, I think it hits on both. About how trying to sort of manage those mental health problems can add to more stress and anxiety. And one of the things I think is really important to think about is trying to incorporate your coping mechanisms into things you already do, so it's not an extra stress. And then say you were getting up and going for a walk at 2:00 in the morning, when those support networks aren't necessarily around, how can you incorporate something into that walk? And for me, when, like Rosie said earlier, it was about birds and listening to the birds that were around me.
That's a bit trickier at 2 a.m.
Yeah,
but
it is.
owl watching maybe.
But there's I downloaded an app that you can listen. You sort of, it identifies the bird calls around you, and that I got over time. I started to sort of really focus in on what birds were around, and it just made me stop thinking about the things that were bothering me. And instead, I'd go for a walk and I'd be listening to what birds were around instead of panicking about something that was going on at work, or something that I thought I'd done wrong, or anything else at all. I was just focused on listening to the birds around me.
That's good advice. And it's interesting, Rosemary, to hear you're talking about perfectionism, because, you know, that standard interview question, isn't it? It's kind of, what's your biggest weakness? And I often highlight that I'm a perfectionist. And they go, oh, it's such an obvious answer. But it is because you're kind of in this constant sense of disappointment, because you kind of hold everybody else up to your standard. And then if they don't do what you're doing, or you're not meeting the standard that you want, you are kind of in a bit of a pit. And so it is a flaw. It's also very useful, but it's kind of an interesting point you make there. Have you found any, either of you, if you have any questions, do post your questions in there and we'll come to those as well. Have you found any particular resources useful? Obviously, you've both talked about the NHS. I guess that's a bit hit and miss. I'm going to say, depending on where in the country you are, how good your GP is. I think the only thing we can say about the health service is be persistent. Don't kind of just, you know, if you're not happy, you keep booking and you keep going back. You might see somebody different the next time you go back. And if you sometimes, you shouldn't have to push, but I think keep pushing. Don't just take the, oh, go away and here's a website you can go to. Do push and keep going back, and you'll get there eventually. But any resources you both found useful? Rosemary?
I will say I was in the US at the time, so I actually have never tried to access mental health anything on the NHS, which I can only imagine is not easy. And so I did. I used BetterHelp, which is a online. I think it also exists here now, and that was, you know, I paid for that, but it was very, very helpful for me. What I would say about resources, and I think my takeaway from talking to Leah and then thinking about this a great deal is, one, you know, be kind to yourself. Don't judge yourself harshly, but the other one is that when you are in a spiral, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's something else, that's not the time to fix anything. You're not fixing things, right? You're in crisis mode. You can't, like, if you are suicidal or you're hurting yourself or whatever it is, then you need to go to a doctor. But that's not necessarily the moment to try and go on the internet and find all the top 2 pages of Google that tell you that the thing you need to do is go for a run. That's not the moment for it. Get yourself through that by whatever mechanism you need to, be that therapy, be that a break, be that 17 pints of ice cream. If you need to lie on your phone scrolling TikTok, like, do it, right? Whatever you need to disengage to get yourself to the point where you're okay again. Do that. When you are out of it, don't assume that your life is going to be good again, right? This will never happen before. That this was a one-off. That's a recipe. That's a recipe for disaster, because at the end of the day, like, life is hard, and humans are messy, and your brain is broken. Everyone's brain is broken in their own special way. You are your own little broken piece of pottery. And so the time to fix your mental health is when you feel good. That is when you focus on it. That is when you build the healthy habits. That is when you start going for a run, or you find swimming, or you discover your love of crochet, or whatever it is, so that when you are spiraling next time, those things don't feel so far away.
Thank you. That's good advice.
And yeah, I'd say also, I know I've really expound running. I do really like to run. It's really important to have more than one thing in each bucket, because one of my second worst mental health crisis moment was during my PhD, when I injured both my knees and couldn't run. And so now what do? Right? If a lot of my mental health happiness is tied up in my ability to run, that's not good. So you gotta have a spider web of things around you that can help lift you above the ground, so that when you start to drop again, you don't drop as far. This is what I'm saying about squashing optimism. You cannot assume that you are going to be a lovely little bundle of sunshine forever and ever, or that once you are out of this, you are going to go back to being a lovely little sunshine bundle, right? That's just plan for the worst. Plan for your worst case scenario, and then live your life as though it's the best life ever. And then, and the life that you have will be somewhere in between.
And talking about this, I mean, really does help. I think whereas we can see from some of the comments we've had, even just our honesty and talking about this, and I think if you're, don't be afraid to talk about it or confide. How as a supervisor do you think, if you're supervising somebody, because I know PhD students and postdocs who have amazing, incredible supervisors who they feel they could talk to about anything. And then others who absolutely would never want to show any signs of weakness or what they perceive as weakness, or talk about themselves to their supervisor. I don't know, Leah, you finished your PhD recently. I didn't give you a chance. I mean, by all means, do tell us as well about any resources you found. But how did you find your supervisor, and what do you want? Could the perfect supervisor do in this situation? How can they help?
I think one of the biggest things that I learned throughout my PhD experience, because that's probably where my mental health was particularly at its worst, personally. So my supervisors were fantastic in that they were very understanding. I'm not sure how happy they were to talk about things, but they listened when I was talking, and they were very patient with me, and they're very understanding. But I think it was really important for me to accept that actually there's not a lot they can do. All they can do is listen, and they can give you the time if it's within their capacity. Like Rosie said earlier about someone, the PI giving her time to go back home and things like that. If they have that ability, then they can do that. But other than that, all they can really do is listen and be understanding and be compassionate. Because as we've shown here, we're all going to go through this at some point.
And I suppose making it clear that they can talk to you about that. So even if you are somebody who has a certain persona at work that makes you come across as unapproachable, make it clear that you can come to me about anything, whatever it is. I don't know, Rosemary, Rosie, you're in that situation now.
I am, and I've had actually already, not as a PI at Dundee, but as a postdoc at MGH, I had some like people coming to me being like, big problems, right? And I had to be like, I cannot solve that for you. All I can do is this. All I can do is give you the space to solve the problem yourself. So that, I think, I also had a fantastic, as I said before, PhD supervisor, excellent postdoc supervisors. They were very, very willing to listen. They were very willing to help when they could. But again, as Leah said, it's not your supervisor's job to solve your mental health problems. That is, you should feel a good supervisor. I'd actually say even a mediocre supervisor should be willing to listen to you, tell them your problems.
I mean, listen and signpost them. They should know what support is available.
They should know what support is available. They should at the very least be able to point you, if you're at a university, which most people are, should at the very least be able to point you to the support system that exists at your university. And there will be one, whether it's student or postdoc or staff or whatever it is. That, I think, is, in my opinion, bare minimum. Having said that, I actually don't know what it is at Dundee, but that's because I just got here. So
you'll know by the end of the day, though.
I would find it. Yeah, exactly. I'll know by the end of the day. So I think So that's kind of my feeling on supervising. It's not your supervisor's job to solve your mental health crisis. It's not your supervisor's job to fix your problems for you. And I do realize that when you are a PhD student, it does feel a little bit different because you are still a student. But PhDs in the UK do operate a little bit, a little bit more like a job almost. So you have to, there is a balance, and they care, right? You're in a lab with 3 people, 4 people, even 12 people. Like, it's not a big environment. Like, your supervisors will care about you, because at the very least, like, happy people get good data and miserable people don't.
What supervisors do have, though, isn't it? They have a responsibility to try and create an environment where mental health, the common mental health problems that academics face, are minimized as much as they can. So when it comes to things like in dealing with work-life balance and burnout and things like that, setting the example of what is a reasonable amount of time to work, not applying excessive pressure on individuals, the things that we know contribute, that you can create a research culture in your group that's positive, that doesn't have those things that we know can contribute towards mental health problems. I've got other stats here. 50% of PhD students report negative relationships with their supervisors. That was reported in Nature in 2019. We know that harassment and bullying is still a problem. 58% of researchers said that they've witnessed bullying in their workplace at some point in time. A 2021 survey found that 70% of academics struggle to switch off from work. 18% of ECRs, only 18% of ECRs feel like they have a good work-life balance. So again, this kind of comes back to, if you're watching this and you're not currently experiencing any mental health problems, knowing that these are the things that can then contribute, allow you to hopefully avoid getting to that stage in the first place.
And practice those things where you can switch off. Practice those things, those activities where you're not going to be thinking about work, where you're completely focused on something else.
Decouple yourself. Find whatever it is that allows you to be you, where you is not a scientist. How do you define yourself, right? So many people, if I said, this is Adam, he's, if I introduce myself, hi, I'm Rosie, I'm a scientist, right? That is, I see a huge part of my identity in my scientistness, right? And so when that starts to get really difficult, people start to crumble. And it's one of the reasons why people have such a poor work-life balance, because they have wrapped so much of their identity up in their job. This is a job. You are doing a job, right? It's a great job. I love my job, but it's not all I am. And so finding those things that are what you are. Hi, I'm Rosie. I'm a cyclist, right? Hi, I'm Rosie. I love hiking. Finding those things that allow you to portray to wrap your identity in something that you do have control over, because you don't have any control over your job, right? If all of my grants dry up, I'm not a scientist anymore.
Does that mean I'm not?
Does that mean I'm not me?
No, because we do that, don't we? When we meet people, you kind of one of the first questions you ask is, "What do you do?" It's not kind of, "Hey, what do you?" It's kind of, "Where are you from and what do you do?" Although "where are you from" is obviously problematic. You can't always answer that question, but they're the two most commonly asked questions when you meet somebody new. I think starting to how you perceive yourself is important in that. Sorry, Leah, I interrupted you.
I can't remember what I was going to say now, but it's just made me realise I was in another meeting this morning where I had to do a slide about myself, introducing myself to the team. So I had a picture of myself, and the first line everyone else had done, "This is my job role, and this is what I'm here for," and I've got 2 dogs. I like quilting and I like knitting.
I quite like that. Yeah. I've seen some talks recently on presentation skills and things like that, which we know, again, knowing you've got a big presentation coming up can be a point of anxiety, can't it? Is kind of how people's first slides are always, "Hello, this is me, I'm a scientist and these are my disclaimers." Is shifting that on its head to say, "Hey, this is me and these are the things I do." Yeah. Seeing a senior researcher kind of go at that differently, I think can be quite inspiring.
Remembered what I was going to say now, because I think one of the things that's really difficult when you are at a low place is to know those things about yourself and know the things you enjoy and are confident in, things that are part of your identity. And I think it's really important to know that it takes time to work those out. And it might be that at the minute you're feeling really low and you just know that you like your bed, and that's fine. And the best thing you can do is invest in spending time on working out what you do like and invest in yourself. And it might take years, but you will get there.
And I do think that's another reason why PhDs have such a moment or tend to be not exclusively. I had a great PhD. My PhD experience was fantastic, but I'd go back and do it in a heartbeat. And I don't know that many other people who would say that, but I had a phenomenal PhD experience. I had no responsibilities. You kidding me? I got to go and play with science every day. It was great. But it does tend to be a period of time in which you are figuring out who you are, right? And a lot of your friends and colleagues are now defining themselves by their job because they have a job and you're still a student. And so you wrap a lot of yourself up in what it is that you are studying because you have this feeling that, you know, that's what you are now, right? And we define ourselves by our early 20s, and that's not very good. You need to constantly be discovering yourself, right? Who you are, what you are, is not a moment in time. It's like, this is going to sound gut-wrenchingly cringy, but it's a journey, right? Where you will try something and you will not like it, and then you will try it again 10 years later and you'll be like, this is cool, I like this is fun, this is great, right? So you got it, just keep trying to find the things that make you feel like you, not even make you happy. If they make you moderately miserable but in a good way, that's fine too.
But all forms of exercise.
All forms of exercise. Look, type 2 fun. Lean into the type 2 fun, people. Like, it's good for you.
Thank you so much, Leah and Rosemary. You've been incredibly generous with your time today, and I really appreciate your open and honesty in talking about your own demons and how you've kind of got through or continuing to deal with those day in, day out. I feel sure that everybody who's watching this as well, those who've joined us live today and those in the recordings, really appreciate that. And thanks for those of you in the comments as well that have made your own points. So these were I did my research, and these were the top 10 takeaways that we could find. And I think all of these are things you've mentioned. So in terms of avoiding these problems or trying to minimize the risks in the first place, setting boundaries and sticking to them, defining clear working hours, working them. I mean, that can change. You know, you can have periods of time when you've got a grant or a deadline or something like that, which can increase, but you've got to balance that out and learn to say no to unrealistic workloads and additional commitments. Prioritize sleep and physical well-being. My watch tells me every day if I've hit my sleep goals. I hate wearing a watch in bed, but I kind of force myself to because I like all the stats as well.
Yeah, just be careful with those, because one of the worst things I've ever experienced was having an incredibly bad night's sleep. And then my Fitbit the next morning told me I'd had a really bad night's sleep. And I was like, yes, thank you. You are going back to the manufacturer. I am done with you, because
the internet says you should get 7 to 8 hours sleep a night. I can't. I aim for 7, to be quite honest. Regular exercise, even short walks, helps reduce stress and improve focus. And find exercise in any way you like, whether that's gardening or taking a walk, swimming, spinning, running. The Couch to 5K I've done before, but parkruns still annoy me because I'll still be in bed and then reading all the social media posts from everybody who's just finished a parkrun to make me feel bad that I'm still in bed drinking coffee, scrolling TikTok. Actually, I don't do TikTok, but parkrun as well is really good. Break tasks into smaller goals. I think this is just a practical thing you can do at work, but large projects can feel overwhelming. Dividing them up into manageable steps and celebrating those small wins as you go through. We've talked about this lots today, but reach out for support. Talk to trusted colleagues, mentors, supervisors, family members. Don't suffer through this alone. And of course, if you really don't feel you can talk to any of those people, there are helplines out there, either through your institution or if you're in the UK, Mind is a wonderful charity for that. Their website, they also have online peer support groups where you can participate anonymously. You don't have to give your name and details. Challenge that imposter syndrome. Remind yourself that you belong in the field where you're in. Success is earned. It's not luck, although it is luck. I've got lots of blogs which talk about it's luck. I think I've also got stats that say something like 70% of grant applications are not funded. So don't let things like, and journal article submissions are down by huge amounts since COVID as well, that things are taking longer. You won't get every grant that you apply for, and you're not the only one that's facing that. There is a lot of luck in that. Right place, right time.
I think the reason I'm so sort of obsessed about the idea that it's luck is that I submitted the same grant application to two places, and one of them funded it and the other one did not, right? And the one that didn't fund it, I got 2, like 1 was the best and 9 was the worst. I got 2 2s and a 7. So 2 people thought it was great. Someone thought it was terrible. And that one person who thought it was terrible meant that it didn't get funded, right?
Yeah.
So it's success is not, it's hard work because you've got to take shots on goal, but for every shot that you take on goal, you have an increased chance of getting it in the goal. If you're just shooting in the wrong direction, then no, that's not happening for you. But one good goalie can
100% agree. We've got a great blog by Yvonne Couch on our website that talks about the role of luck in academia. Right? Go have a look at that. Make time for those non-academic activities. Stay connected to the communities around you. Try to manage that stress with these mindfulness and relaxation techniques. I'm a northerner who's middle-aged, and if you'd have asked me to practice mindfulness or do breathing techniques, I would have scoffed, because that's just what mindfulness. I go, even if it's not your thing, have a look. That whole breathing app and things on your phone actually does make a difference. So even if you're cynical, do check these things out. Reframe those failures as learning experiences, and as Leah and Rosemary both pointed out today, most importantly, be kind to yourself, I think is an important one. Thank you so much, Dr. Leah Fulliger, Dr. Rosemary Jackson. You've both been incredible. I'm really grateful for you being here today. And everybody, was it Fraser Crane that used to say at the end of his show, good mental health?